Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbite. Joining us is Brian Savage, who is the House Minority Whip for the Republicans. Brian, welcome. I should
Thank
say
you.
welcome back. I must thank Brian. We did a show with you a couple of weeks ago, and Ben Kinsley is here as my co-host, and I don't know what happened, technical difficulties, and you're very kind to come back and redo the show.
Quite all right.
That's very
Anytime.
nice. It's a long ride from Swanton down here. So.
1 hour, 5 minutes, but who's
Well,
counting?
who's counting? Well, we thank you.
Well, if I'm counting, I have 35 minutes from my driveway to
Right.
Really,
my,
for Berkeley.
yeah.
That's. I don't want to know how fast you're going. So, all right. So you know the routine. We asked you to
Right.
tell a little bit about yourself.
All right. Okay. Well, I am presently in my 5th term as one of the 2 representatives from the Franklin 4 district that is comprised of the towns of Swanton and Sheldon in Franklin County. And I've been the Assistant Minority Leader, or the whip, since 2012. The former whip had decided to step down in that position, and I was approached, and here I am. And in my other life, my real life, I've been a lifetime employed in the banking industry up until about 10 years ago, and since 2007 I'm self-employed running a small business and municipal consulting firm. And when I'm finished the gig in the legislature, I think I'll add political consulting to that.
I think you would know how to do that very well. Now, just 2 seconds worth of what's the whip? What is that? What does that job mean?
Well, it's the Assistant Minority Leader, and I prefer that term, but in days of old, the whip would be doing the arm twisting, making sure that all the votes got in line, that people were going to, of your caucus were going to vote the way that you wanted them to vote, and as well as providing some logistic support. And from what I read up, and then the term started in Congress actually, and they literally beat people into submission. We don't do that now, and so that's why I prefer the Assistant Minority Leader title.
It's the Vermont way here, so
Right.
we're sort of
That's right.
anyway.
So, Brian, when you were on the show at the beginning of the session, because we invited all the legislative leaders on in January to talk about their priorities for the year, you identified several priorities for the Republican Party, being property taxes, an affordable Vermont, school choice, a vibrant economy, good paying jobs, and affordable health care.
Right.
A whole bunch of stuff in there. Were you successful in achieving your priorities, or were you able to set the stage for next year and moving forward on some of those issues?
Well, I feel that we've had limited success in, but we did definitely set the stage forward. I mean, this is the first time that we actually had a budget passed with no tax increase, and it was also the first time, I believe, that I ever voted for that. And we also attempted, of course, as we know, the governor, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit, with the educational cost savings, net savings of $26 million, but that got a compromise in there. So I think we've set up the stage so that going forward, either next year or certainly in the next biennium, I think that we should be able to continue on the path. We've had a lot of ideas, many bills introduced relative to school choice, vibrant economy, whatnot, and those are, for lack of a better term, sitting on the wall. A lot of them just didn't get a lot of steam. However, the governor's proposal for a $35 million housing initiative did get passed in the budget. That will be providing some jobs as well as some affordable housing that is desperately needed throughout Vermont. And so we're looking forward to seeing how that's going to work out.
And yet, may I say, you said they're having trouble getting off the wall. When we have had the representatives from the Democratic and progressive parties, everybody agrees what they heard from the voters about what they want, a strong economy, lower property tax. They've heard, everybody agrees that's what they've heard.
That's what they've heard.
I posted on Facebook for Vote for Vermont all of the bills, and there were the usual 5 charters and you know, all the things that are sort of not the core
the
for
rubber
the
stamp
and
ones,
there were maybe 2 that dealt with economic development. That's what people want. How do you get them to move?
Well, I'll cut right to the chase. You know, I have my own opinions on economic development, and I think my own opinion here, just me,
okay.
but the state of Vermont needs to look at its permitting process and how, you know, there is no reason why it should take 4 or 5 or more years
Right.
to get a project going, when they can go across the lake to New York, and they're talking about it today. 6 months later, it's occupied and
Right.
business is being conducted. And there's many states where we're really very much in a disadvantage, I think, because of that. So we need to address that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Act 250 in the permitting process, but the process needs to be greatly streamlined.
And you can do that while protecting the environment.
Absolutely.
I mean, this either or scenario, just you can do both.
Well, it's the endless appeals piece of it, is because
Yeah. That's
A&R, the Agency of Natural Resources, can sign off on a project saying this, they do all the things they need to do to mitigate the environmental impact, and then a neighbor can appeal it because they don't want, you know, not in my backyard
That's
type
right.
of thing. You know, the classic example I like to use of this, the way that Act 250 can be abused, is Costco in Colchester has been trying to put in a gas station for 20 years,
Right.
And every year that they go to apply for it, the owner of the gas station on the corner, right up the
Skip.
street from them,
Right.
Yeah.
knocks it down in environmental court, right?
Right.
And so it's being used as a tool basically to anti-compete, and that's just one example.
Right.
There's plenty of other examples, but you know, so I think that there is room to improve the process, and what I think is also interesting, we've seen movement this year in the legislature on moving forward with amending the Act 250 permitting process. The administration, A&R, has been asking for this because feel like they're being undermined.
Right.
That their approval of a project doesn't carry a whole lot of weight in the whole scheme of things.
Right.
So there's pressure from the administration to change. There's now legislative interest in it. And the other thing that I think is really interesting, talking about Act 250 specifically, is as I talk to business leaders around the state and people that are involved in the public policy sphere, I hear over and over again, oh, we need to change regulations, we need to roll back on X, Y, and Z, and what they're talking about is Act 250, and it's not coming from you know, your typical Republican business types. It's coming from Democrats, from moderate Democrats around the state, and I think that's fascinating that we're now starting to hear that type of conversation coming from people that are across the political spectrum.
Right, and I think it's, you know, initially when Act 250 came in, I think it's a good thing. I still believe it's a good thing.
do
It's the
too.
way with which
Right.
it's administered. And I've said this before, and somebody out there, please correct me if I'm wrong, but every time that I drive north on 89 from south of Montpelier north, and I look out and I see the offices of National Life, and I think, you know, former Governor Dean Davis was the CEO of National Life, and he was, of course, instrumental in it was, Act 250 was his bill, and I'm thinking, this is not what he had envisioned, what we're going through right now.
I'm sure not.
Because I really wonder if that building would be there now if Act 250
Right.
was in place the way it is now.
Well, I think we've heard on, I'm trying to remember what show it was, but we were told they want predictability.
Right.
If you go into a project, you want to know that this process is going to take you 6 months
Right.
and it's going to cost you X.
X, right.
But this dragging on for a year or 2 years,
Right.
and you're putting money down a hole.
Right.
You just want to know.
You
And
just
wanna
that's not-
know.
That's fair.
And certainly other business people out there, you mentioned Costco, and in Franklin County we had the Walmart.
Right.
fiasco.
Walmart was the other one.
yes.
Yeah.
20 years.
20 years took them to put it in. Yeah.
So if I'm thinking of locating a new factory to give a few hundred jobs, and I'm thinking, well, Vermont, they couldn't even put up a Walmart, and they wouldn't even like Costco. It took them 20 years.
Right,
Well, I'm
right.
not even going to look there.
And it's doing well now, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's doing
It's
very
doing
well.
great.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't mean to, but this year, and we talked about it when you were on the show before, there's so many new people, new governor, new people in the legislature, a lot of new legislators. We had a new speaker, a new Senate pro tem. how did it change any, or was there any noticeable? I think Mitzi brought a little bit of a change.
There was certainly a change. It was, we went through most of the session thinking that we didn't do much. I know everybody's trying to get their feet wet and trying to know their places. Now, there was, I believe, 20 new members on the Democrat side that came in.
And some key people left.
And very key people. And Mitzi didn't subscribe to the way of which the former Speaker, Shap Smith, did. She was kind of letting people vote, and there was a number of votes that they came in, a number of them sided with us.
Using their own judgment?
Yes.
Whoa.
Which I was,
There's a concept.
surprised about, which was a good thing.
Yes, a very
I'm not
good thing.
complaining. There was a great amount of confusion, however, and I just don't think that. And hopefully, when we get back there next January, things will have settled down, and we, will be a little bit more organized.
Right. Well, and it's a learning curve for Mitzi,
Right.
because you can look at that job for 20 years, but when you're in it,
It's a whole different
It's
ball.
a
Right.
whole
It is
different-
a whole-
it's a- it
and
is.
plus, she didn't have much floor time because she's been on appropriations so long.
That's-
As you
that's
know,
a
they're
good point.
They're squirreled away in that room up there in the corner.
I
and
never
they-
thought of that. That's
Right.
because when you're on appropriations, you don't see the floor.
No,
you're
you're
just
never on
working
the
there.
floor.
Right.
I've never actually ever wanted to be on appropriations.
Right, 'cause you miss the
because you miss
action.
the whole thing.
That's
you know?
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, so
Well, it's interesting too, I think, because all the leadership this year, not just in the House, but the Senate leadership was totally different, and of course you have the new administration, and I think everyone was kind of feeling each other out to see what the
Yeah.
different leadership styles are, and
So now that we've got a handle on that, I think a pretty
that'll
good
be
one.
good. Maybe
I
this will
think,
be a good year,
we go
because
forward.
I think those issues are still there. I haven't
Right.
seen anything. We did have an economic development bill.
We did.
Which I heard, which I understand was pretty good, but a lot,
Yeah.
lot work
But
left
there
to
was
do.
still a lot. I'm talking. Somebody asked me locally, because I'm involved with local economic development, and my idea is bricks, mortar, jobs. Build the factories,
they
or
will come.
build the office buildings. The jobs will come, then the rest will fall.
Right, probably right.
You know,
Yeah,
so we'll see.
We've
how.
got a lot to offer here, I think.
Well, we do. I mean, we have a good workforce and all, but there are a number of very significant obstacles.
Right, right. That's good.
So at the end of January, the governor submitted his budget, presented it to the legislature, and Don Turner, who's the minority leader you work with, called it a step in the right direction. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts and the thoughts of your caucus about the pros and the cons of the original budget that the governor proposed and kind of how it evolved?
Well, I think certainly it was definitely a step in the right direction. The proposed budget that he had placed did not call for tax increases, which we did end up with, which was good. I think any time that we have no tax increase
That's a good thing.
or no significant fee increase is a good thing. They were able to provide without cutting services. They were able to maneuver. I always call it the pots of money around to be able to keep the level of services somewhat
Right,
intact. So I think from that positive standpoint, it was good. And then the Democrat progressive caucuses, their leadership said that he sprung his educational idea on us by surprise. Well, no, he didn't. He mentioned it on January 11th, I believe, is the date.
Yeah, his inaugural address, right?
Right, and so it came as no surprise. They just kind of probably chose not to listen to it, and I was disappointed that I didn't follow through. And for the viewers who don't know this, he had said $26 million in savings. That's really the net savings. The actual gross savings was going to be $75 million.
Oh, I hadn't heard that number.
Yeah, and then
Right.
they used $50 million to
To
hold.
go into the HSAs.
So I actually thought it was half of the 36, because it's only for half a fiscal year.
Well,
if
then
they
it's cut in
count.
half.
Right, they didn't cut in half.
Yeah, and then it's
And
cut
then
in
the
half.
following
But
year, you'd see it
annualized.
all.
Right.
Right.
So, but annualized, you're right. It's 26 million.
So the HSAs were going to be established, and people would be made whole.
Yeah.
So that would cover their out-of-pocket and their increase in their premiums, which as we know, the NEA was very much opposed to that. So in the end, I think what they ended up with, well, we're only going to save $13 million. I don't believe there's any HSA in there. Some contracts that have been signed are still going to end up with an increase in premiums. They're changing their insurance plan, and they're going to have to make up the
The
difference.
union didn't object to HSAs, did they?
No, I
No,
don't
but how are
think
they going to fund them?
right.
Because
that
that
was the
really
thing.
gives you, the employee, a lot of
Yeah.
control. I mean,
Well, a lot
those
of teachers
HSAs are great.
liked moving to that, right? Because it gives
Yeah.
them more control.
Yep.
Well, my wife, in full disclosure, we're covered under the teacher's insurance. And she tried to encourage her coworkers that this plan of the governor was good, but oh no, they were listening to the NEA, and so we'll
Right.
see how it goes.
So it's interesting. The budget that the governor proposed. You mentioned that it included the piece with the teachers' health care contracts. It was in there. It was in there along with another proposal to force local
Right.
school districts
That's
to
right.
level fund
Right.
in order to cover the costs of shifting the health care and retirement benefits back into the education
That's right.
fund instead of the general
And
fund.
he talked about
Right.
the 80-20 in the inaugural.
And he did
too,
talk
so
about the 80-20
That's
split.
part of the whole deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was in there, although it was in there in a slightly different form because it was coupled with other savings to do kind of a different, to basically do a cost shift from the general fund to the ed fund, and then to pay for that. But I think some legislators were maybe blindsided that it came back around at the end of the session. They weren't quite expecting it to come back, and even if it's in a different form.
I'm sure they at least they admit to being blindsided. They didn't know what was
Right,
going
right.
on, but maybe they were just hoping it was going to go away. I don't know.
Maybe that's what was happening.
And when the governor saw there was really no action, no discussion being said, so he brought it up again.
So it's another interesting thing that happened this year is, of course, the legislature passed a budget that was no new taxes, no new fees. It was almost universally supported. In fact, there was one legislator, that only one that voted against it, which is basically unheard of. And then Governor Scott was put in an uncomfortable position of having to veto a bill that was basically everything that he asked for.
That's right.
In a budget because in order to pursue these savings with the teachers' health care plans. Can you share your thoughts on how that went down at the end of the session, and if it could have played out differently, or if it worked out in the governor's favor?
Well, there's been several schools of thought on that issue. First of all, he did veto it. I thought that was the appropriate thing to do. How can you walk away with $26 million still on the table in savings? Though he got everything he wanted, but there's still the opportunity to save $26 million.
Right.
So I thought the appropriate thing to do was to veto it. And yes, there was going to be discussion, there was going to be compromise. And people were worried that we were going to shut down the state come 12:01 a.m. on July 1st. So from that aspect, there was a lot of discussion. There was compromise. They had negotiations. But when we were called in for the veto session, now the press has erroneously reported in the past, like the last biennium, that they had the supermajority. Well, no, they didn't, because we had 53 seats.
Right.
We still have 53 seats. But the veto session, right off the bat, proved that we can sustain a veto. And we sustained both the tax bill veto and the budget veto right in a row. Bang, bang.
That's great.
So our caucus stuck together. The whip and everybody else
whip was
doing their
working
job.
hard, right?
And we stuck together, and plus a few of the independents joined us. And that, to me, showed the majority that,
Good.
we can, we better
can do
pay
this.
attention.
Right.
So I think that was a big plus right there. And then, of course, we moved on to the business at hand, the compromise bill. Some people said, well, no, the governor caved in on that, and everybody who voted for it caved in on it. I think, it's not I think it set the stage for either next year or
Right,
certainly the
right.
following year. The discussion's going to be held again. How can we save this money? And I think it's got things rolling.
Well, it also reset the clock, right?
And it did reset the
Because
clock.
it forces all of these contracts to open up again in 2019. So
Right.
it gives you more time.
And that was in the bill, right? That was in
Right,
the agreement, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think overall it was successful. I think the strategy used at times we were kind of scratching our head, thinking, well, what's going to take place here? But I
That's
think
good. Good
it
for you
did
guys.
prove that we did have the votes. And then, of course, that third instance that we had to deal with that day in the veto session, of course, was the suspension of rules to bring up
Right,
the
right.
marijuana.
And did you guys agree to do that? I actually was.
No, we didn't.
We didn't.
We stuck
Talked
together.
about that, that's great.
We stuck together and did not suspend the rules.
Good for you.
And because I said all along, and many others in our caucus, and by the way, we had 20, I think it was like 18 or 20 additional votes that
Oh,
voted
really?
with
From
us
the
on that.
independent,
Yeah.
and who
And
knows,
the
Democrats?
And so that bumps it to January now.
Yeah.
Right.
So you'll be coming back in January.
And,
They
oh, yeah.
actually could have put it on the calendar that what they could take it up in when that special session's happening for the federal
If
Yeah,
they had
in
enough
October.
time.
in October, but I don't
Yeah.
think they did that. They
They
just
didn't.
let it
They
sit.
just let it sit. And
Yeah.
I think if that special session is actually going to happen, we don't know
We
yet.
hope not.
We hope not. And so I said, well, what's the big rush? I mean, and others were agreeing with me. We can take this up in January because, you know, if we had taken that issue up, we would have been there for
Another week.
another week.
Well, and then you'll have there's a study in the new thing,
Yes.
right? That you'll have in January
Right.
to.
Right.
Yeah.
Because all of a
So-
sudden, I have to say, I thought the police, and don't go calling me, I thought the police were okay with the marijuana bill, but after
I
this
don't
all
think
happened, there
so.
was one article after another about the police saying, we don't like this bill.
No, I don't
Yeah.
ever recall the police
Oh,
saying
really?
they liked
Well,
it.
then I stand corrected. I just thought,
Because the morning of the veto session, the police association had a big press conference in Cedar
oh,
Creek.
good, well, now I'm very proud of them. Always proud of them, but now I'm doubly proud. Because I talked to my husband who's retired, and I'm like,
Yes.
what are they doing?
Yeah, no, I think
Oh, good, I'm glad I asked you.
I would be very surprised if they ever
Well, because they
changed it.
really were very vocal
Right.
afterwards. There was one article after another. So the tax bill, we haven't talked much about that. What was in the tax bill? Do you remember at all? I mean, obviously, something went up when we said we weren't increasing taxes in the budget, but the tax bill is the tax bill, so something
Well, there was
must have gone
some
up.
moving around of the educational tax rate.
Oh.
And in the end, now I'm trying to recall exactly what we did. I apologize.
No,
I
that's
can't
okay. I've
remember.
just sprung this on you.
But there was some movement there.
Because that's where the tax rate is set, so they
Yes.
need to, so maybe that's all there was in
Well,
the
that's
tax
for the
bill.
statewide tax.
Statewide
Right.
tax.
Yeah.
Right.
And they, I know they were going to increase that on non-residential property.
Yep,
Right.
2
I heard
cents. Leave residential alone, or possibly even decrease the residential.
So they can't,
one.
because they can't actually adjust one of the things Act 46 did is actually fix the rate for non-property tax, or excuse me, for homestead property
yeah,
tax.
right.
So that's now fixed at $1. So all they can vary are the income tax rate and the non-homestead
Right.
tax rate, and they only inflate those to adjust for what they expect the average statewide tax to be for homesteads.
Of course, there's, for the non-residential rate, there was a great amount of concern on that, because that is including businesses, and as well as, well, people with just additional property.
Right,
Second homes.
Second homes, deer camps.
It includes
you name it.
businesses? You
Sure,
consider
it's
that
not-
as non-res?
it's
Oh, I guess
non-residential.
Anything, anything
Oh,
that's not your
gosh.
house and 2
Right.
acres.
House and 2 acres.
House and 2 acres
That you
is
live
homestead.
in, that's it.
Yeah.
So, that's definitely in an apartment house. If you don't reside in it, and I believe if they use the federal definition, going back to my mortgage
Yeah,
days,
right.
if it's 1 to 4 family owner occupied, then it should be residential. That's the way the mortgages work.
Right.
If it's not owner occupied, or if it's more than 4 families, then it's considered non-residential.
Great.
Yeah.
And
So
in
we
many
hit them
cases, the
small
non-residential
businesses
rate's
again.
lower.
Oh, sure.
Okay, I'm just checking.
What's that?
I said in many cases, the non-residential rate's lower,
Yes, yes.
depending on what your local spending is.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's but small business again is is up against the wall as usual, unfortunately.
So I just came up with a couple of, Ben and I were talking about a couple of issues that have nothing to do with what we've been just talking about. And we've done shows on the independent contractor.
Yes.
Did anything happen this year?
No,
on the
there's,
independent contractor? It's still in limbo.
It's still in limbo. There's, I believe, 4 bills that were introduced.
Right, there's a lot.
And they're all sitting on the wall. 4 bills, and I'm not sure if the split there is House, Senate, but they're still sitting on the wall. It's one of these, oh, well, we'll do it. But again, it's certain committees are not going to go against anything that the unions may have a problem
This issue
with.
has been around since I was Commissioner of
Well,
Labor.
say you were Commissioner of Labor.
This
It
was,
an
I
issue
thought
then.
we fixed it back then. There was a bill and here we are. Still again, and yet.
But nothing's ever finished
No, I
in this
know.
case.
Exactly. So the other one is the Lake Champlain cleanup.
Right. Well, on the cleanup, and it's somewhere here I brought numbers with
Oh,
me.
good.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not just Lake Champlain; it's all waters of the state.
I go for
Okay.
that.
During the 2017 legislative session, roughly $54 million was appropriated for water cleanup efforts. 21,900,000 is for the water quality in the capital bill
Oh, I forgot about the capital bill.
for fiscal year 2018,
Right.
and a little over $17 million is available in transportation-related water quality.
Right.
Transportation-related water quality.
So that's runoff from like roads and
Right,
parking
sure.
lots and
Ag,
stuff.
maybe ag, I don't know. Is that it?
And a little over $9 million is for stormwater grants to municipal roads, and a little over $8 million is for stormwater management on state highways and AOT non-road developed plans. $10 million is the amount the state will receive in annual repayments to the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, so that money will become
Right,
available.
coming back.
And $6.5 million in federal funds are expected, new money that Vermont will receive for the Clean Water
So somewhere in
Revolving
there
Fund.
must be the ag runoff, some from the farms?
Yes, yes,
Is that
it's in there
somewhere?
someplace.
Probably transportation.
Transportation, I
guess.
was
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
into-
probably into the transportation.
So what's the hope here?
Well, I mean, that's just kind of the drop in the proverbial bucket.
Alexander, like before I drop dead, are we gonna swim in
But they
Lake
do
Champlain?
hope, there's a great amount of money. I mean, $54 million, I think, is a lot of money that's being appropriated in 1 year, and it's going to take just as much each year going forward, so the experts tell us, possibly even more. But I have not, there's all this money, and I have not seen a plan. Just exactly what are they going to do with this?
I thought we had to submit a plan to the EPA or.
Well, they submitted a plan,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but they don't say what they're going to do this year with this money.
Excellent, good for us. They better do something about Lake Champlain. That is, I don't
better.
think people realize how, this is no joke.
This is no joke, yeah.
This is an economic driver for us.
Well, it is,
You can't
and-
have a lake the size of Lake Champlain not being in good health.
And if you go up in my area in St. Albans Bay and Missisquoi Bay,
Right.
it's really bad at
Really?
times. Oh yeah, because the lowest elevation in the state is on the shores of Lake Champlain in Franklin County.
Oh, I
And
didn't
of
know
course, the
that.
bay, the lake flows north and it gets into the bays. There you have it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian, for coming back. We've run out of time.
Okay.
It was
Well,
very nice.
thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks,
All
Ben.
right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for
Ben.
tuning
Yeah.
in. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.